So from a very early age, I've always been interested in Eastern culture. And like many boys, like many American boys, I loved Kung Fu and ninja movies and all that. And I remember checking out some martial arts books from the library. And my favorite martial arts book was called Kung Fu. And in the back, it actually had a list of quotations from Confucius, and it showed some illustrations of people doing amazing things, like breaking their arms, but then getting super strength in their arms, or crawling up walls with their fingers, or just really bizarre, amazing feats of strength that they accomplished using Qigong, which is energy work, and Kung Fu. And I didn't really understand so much of that, but I just found it completely fascinating. I've always had an interest in Eastern religions, and that's one reason I've spent so much time out here in the Orient. One faith that has come up in the 90s, which I've noticed but haven't had so much contact with, but I finally decided to research, is Falun Gong. And Falun Gong is a Qigong practice. I guess to clarify, I would consider it a unique religion that's based on Buddhism and Taoism, and it's sort of its own third thing. But it's an integration of all of that energy work. And it's by Li Hongzhi, and Li Hongzhi is a Qigong master in China, and he came public with Falun Gong in the 90s. And since then, because of various factors, which I won't get into now, the Chinese government, the communist government, has cracked down on them and outlawed them in China. And in fact, they are going through a lot of severe persecution, similar to other religious groups in China, including Muslims and Christians. The Falun Gong practitioners have had problems with organ harvesting. That's one nefarious thing that they've done in China. However, as far as my encounters with it, my encounters in China were very limited, because when I lived in China, I remember we used a VPN that was run through the Falun Gong guys, and that's the most we knew about it. And I also remember at one point in my apartment, and I lived in a pretty working class, normal apartment, very kind of low-end apartment where you wouldn't see many foreigners. I even had a squat toilet there, you know. But I remember one morning I found a pamphlet, like a tract from Falun Dafa, and I was really amazed by it. And I don't know if I kept it or what. It was in Chinese, so I imagine I threw it away. I can't imagine I have it. I would love to find it somewhere in my old stuff if I ever get back to digging through those old boxes that I kept in the States. But one of my colleagues out there in China, he's still in China, he told me that I should keep it, because just having that, having them hand that to me is a punishable offense. They could have been thrown in jail and had their organs harvested and everything else. But it was in Chinese anyway, and I only vaguely knew what it was. They put in these illustrations where it's just one or two movements. So flash forward several years later to last fall, when I noticed that I kept seeing these Falun Dafa guys in the park, and I would recognize them because part of their movement, it's based on their texts, but then it's also based on 5 spiritual exercises that they repeat every day. And there's groups of them here in Hanoi, and I've seen them do it out in the park. And one time I was walking by them, they're going through the mudras, they call them, the Buddha's hand motions, right? They've got this whole set of them. I can't really do them. I tried practicing at one point, but someone handed me this pamphlet in English. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, it doesn't really explain the motions. But it was the first time one of these has been handed to me in English, and also, incidentally, the first time that I've seen foreigners, as in non-Chinese or non-Vietnamese, I suppose, because there's a group of Vietnamese doing it out here. And so I just kind of forgot about it, put it away, and went back to my other thing. But it was only recently that I decided to give it another closer look out of curiosity. Because all of their materials are free, so it's just a matter of going online and printing them up. And I printed up the 2 basic books. You see, I've already worn out the cover on Zhuan Falun. This is called Turning the Law Wheel, and I've got so many notes inside of it. So I'll just briefly go over that. And then Falun Gong is their basic. This is the first text. It was originally called Zonghua Falun Gong, Chinese Falun Gong, which is the summary of all the motions, including the pictures of Li Hongzhi doing the motions. And then he goes over some of the philosophy behind it and all that. Now the philosophy is interesting, the movements are interesting. I don't know much about Qigong or Tai Chi or yoga or any of that. So it has been an introduction to that, but I did know a lot about Buddhism going in, and a lot about Taoism. In fact, it's been amazing going through and reading parts in this text, Chuan Falun, that actually I know the original sayings in Chinese. And my Chinese is so limited that it's been a very meaningful way to connect to this text. But anyway, to give a summary of what Falun Gong is all about. Gong is a word that means work. And Falun is the wheel. So it's working the wheel of the universe. The wheel of the universe in their perception is a swastika they call a Shravista, covered in or surrounded by 4 yin-yang symbols and another 4 swastikas, and it's always rotating inwardly, clockwise, outwardly, counterclockwise, distributing the energy of the universe, which happens on a scale that's subatomic within our bodies as well as infinitely grand. He makes the quote in Chuan Falun that the Buddha said the universe is both infinitely expansive and infinitely reductive, and so there is no such thing as seeing the exact smallest piece of anything, which is one of many mind-blowing sayings that he has in this book. Of course, okay, so I was talking about Falun Gong. This goes through the actual exercises, but I guess the holy text, the closest thing that these guys have to a Bible is Chuan Falun, which means turning the law wheel, which is a series of 9 lectures which goes over everything from supernatural phenomena like clairvoyance, clairsentience, telekinesis, telepathy. He offers some explanations for that as far as history, the development of Qigong. He says that this is the fullness of Taoism and Buddhism and Christianity and all religions that eventually point to understanding the basic substance of the universe. It's such an expansive topic. But basically, Falun Dafa says there's no services, there's no clergy, there's just practitioners, it's just people who meet and do the 5 exercises, which take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour to do in a big setting. And I have yet to join the group here, but I would like to do that. And they also say read the text. He's still producing literature. Li Hongzhi is still out there and he's still writing books. But I've just read the 2 main ones, Falun Gong and Chuan Falun. And Chuan Falun, Turning the Law Wheel, is considered the central text. And it has a lot of amazing stuff in it. I mean, it explains everything in terms of Taoism. It explains all the different branches of Buddhism and sort of draws them together to this one focal point where, just as the Buddhists say we need to reach enlightenment through emptiness, but we also need to reach enlightenment through nothingness, as the Taoists say we need to focus on ourselves rather than trying to fix the entire world. The whole idea of Falun Dafa is that you cultivate more character and more health. And character, it comes down to the 3 basic components of the universe, which are Jin, Shen, and Ren. Truthfulness, compassion, forbearance, or if we want to reduce it even further and put it in what I like to call Christian Science terms, because these are the same words that were on display at the altar at my old church in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, First Church of Christ Scientists. Truth, love, and life. Everything can be reduced down to these 3 things. Truthfulness, Zhen, truth. Honesty is the real power behind the universe. And love is the real power behind the universe. Not hate, but is love for one another, compassion, experiencing suffering. There's so much in Chuan Falun about how when you become a spiritual person, you have to suffer a great deal. And once you suffer, once you realize that other people are suffering, you become a better person. And you become more compassionate, more loving. And that's forbearance, that's life. That's life happening equally to all people. And as he says in the very end, and he's quoting someone else, he doesn't say who, but he says, nothing is truly unbearable or impossible. And in an earlier point, another point that I highlighted, and I highlighted so much of this book, he says that you should hold yourself to high standards and raise the bar. And so anyway, I would like to go through in more detail and talk about Falun Dafa, even though this might prevent me from ever finding work in mainland China again. Some loss, but I have at least made my pilgrimages there to different parts. And I do know a little bit of Chinese, which has helped me through this, but there's a lot to say about Falun Dafa, and I would like to make more videos about it in the future. Over and out.